NFL owners' meetings taking place in Minneapolis. Albert Breer's the Monday morning quarterback, but he works every morning, including Tuesdays, and he joins us now, the senior NFL reporter. Okay, what's the headline today? What's the headline going to be coming out of the owners' meetings?
Well, today it's going to be the Olympics. Tomorrow it'll be what happens with the tush push and playoff seeding. I think the Olympic thing is going to sail through. And I think that there's a lot of big picture things that the owners are thinking about there. As you know, Dan, like football's a tough sport to export. If you're trying to get kids overseas playing, and it's not like basketball or soccer where you can just set up a couple goals or a couple hoops and roll out the balls and teach kids. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes into building it up, and trying to legitimize flag football has been the NFL's way of trying to get around that. And, they're trying to make it a varsity sport, and high schools here. It's a way to engage young girls and try to get them involved. And obviously now overseas, it's a lot easier to bring the flag version than the tackle version overseas. So that's an initiative that's been a longstanding one for the league. And I think they're probably going to vote things through. It'll get interesting when we figure out who actually would go. But I think they'll vote that through today. And then tomorrow, the tush push is going to be voted on. And I think that one, the commissioner of the league office really want to get that through. Whether or not it winds up winning the vote, I think is up in the air. My guess would be they push something through, but they have adjusted that. The Packers proposal has been significantly adjusted over the last 24 hours. And then you have the playoff seeding thing, which at least feels to me right now like more of they're setting the stage for 2026. I don't know that after only having a handful of teams supporting it in March that they're going to be able to vote that through tomorrow.
What role do the Eagles play in the tush push?
They've been pretty aggressive in fighting it. Howie Roseman stood up at the owners meeting in March and basically said, well, like, if you say this is such a dangerous play, I want to see the injury data. And there really isn't injury data. And what the chief medical officer of the NFL said to the room was, we haven't had major injuries, but when we have one based on the posture of the quarterback on this play, it's going to be catastrophic. And it's interesting because that's one argument. And then teams that are for banning it, it's a different argument. It's not a football play, it's a rugby play. So like the Eagles have been steadfast in feeling like they're being targeted here, and feeling like this is only an issue because they've gotten so good at it, and they think it's a bad precedent for the league to set when one team gets really good at one thing and it's deemed unfair that now you can, find a way to get it taken out of the game. At the same time, if you go back to 2004, there was a rule in the books that prevented all pushing and pulling of offensive teammates, and that got repealed for reasons that had nothing to do with what Philly's doing. The reason why was because downfield blocks had become harder to officiate, and delineating whether or not an offensive player was blocking a defender or pushing his own teammate across a line to gain, a goal line, whatever. So it's complicated. There's a lot that's going into it. Again, the Eagles were vocal in March, and they've certainly, been on the phones over the last few days too, and trying to make their case to other teams that'll be voting tomorrow.
Let me go back to the Olympics, because I said that I get what the NFL wants. They want expansion, and they're not going to do expansion where you're playing pro football around the country or around the world and having NFL teams in different cities. How do you grow football? You grow football with flag football, because all you need is really a football and, a field to play on. They want to compete with soccer, globally. They want to compete with basketball globally. You get boys and girls playing. I'm all for all of that. Varsity sport, all for that. I just don't get the gimmick of, we got one player who will represent Team USA who's an NFL player. Who cares?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, and I'm skeptical that it's gonna even work that way. Can I tell you a personal story on this one, Dan?
Sure.
So back when I was in college at Ohio State, we were in a fraternity league, and we had a bunch of us played high school football, and we wound up winning our fraternity league, right? And we won our fraternity league by playing, like running football plays. So then, we kind of like, we're like, well, what happened? What would happen if we entered this like Nike Elite League, right? And so we got our freaking doors blown off playing in this Nike Elite League. And what we found out in doing that was like this flag league, like it wasn't like football. It was a different sport altogether. There were laterals and pitches, and and it had nothing to do with size and strength. I mean, it's just like it's a different thing altogether if you're really doing it. So, like I understand the concept of putting NFL players out there. I just wonder if the juice is worth the squeeze. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like so you get a little more attention on it by putting NFL players out there, but are they the best players in the world at that specific thing? If you're giving people 5 years to train for this, are you saying like an NFL player will be ready in a month to go and compete? And if I'm a team, like I look at that and say like that's when a guy's getting ready for training camp. So instead of, getting ready for the rigors of an NFL season, he's going to be doing something completely different than preparing for tackle football. I, it's just it's complicated for all of those reasons, and I think the risk here would be, are you just turning this into a freak show? You know what I mean? Like it's just like okay, like come watch the 250 pound tight end go out and play against a bunch of 180 pound guys from France. You know what I mean? Like, is that what we're doing here? And is that good for the long-term viability of flag football as a sport? I don't know. I think those are all questions that are worthy. And I don't know one way or the other. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I think those are all viable questions.
Talking to Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback, joining us from the owners' meetings. The Brock Purdy contract.
Yeah.
A lot of times we get the final number and we go, wow, but then you break it down and you get guaranteed money. I know there's a no trade clause in there. What was the strategy on both sides here to get to this number?
So I think there were three comps that they were working off of. Because the one thing that the Niners established right away is we're not going to be breaking records here. Like that can't be the goal of this negotiation. And so, Purdy's side then basically came back at him and said, okay, like, well, then we need strong guarantees. We need strong structure. As a guy who was once Mr. Irrelevant and, with the Niners' history of being able to win with different quarterbacks, I think what Brock Purdy really wanted here was affirmation. Like, this contract shows that I'm going to be your guy for the foreseeable future. And there aren't like all these trap doors that'll allow for you to get out of the contract. And so, the three comps that they had worked off of were Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jared Goff. And I think the one that they came closest with was Goff, where you have, a team that's a winning team in Detroit, where you have a quarterback who's a really good player, who's got a lot of good players around him. And, you know, the quarterback in that case, Jared Goff in that case, wasn't consumed with taking every dollar off the table, but he wanted to know that he was going to be the Lions quarterback going forward. And so I think those were the comps. And I think when you look at it, when the full details come out, we'll see. My sense is that like about 176 million is going to be virtually guaranteed. And this contract will reflect you can bank on Brock Purdy being the quarterback for the next 4 years, so 2025 through 2028. So the Niners do a deal that in this environment is reasonable at $53 million per year, and Purdy gets his assurances that he's going to be their guy going forward.
Should we extract anything more than what we probably already have with Caleb Williams and his father and the story that's coming out that they were going to try to blow up the draft because he didn't want to go to the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, two things. Number one, I would say it's a tough look for Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron and the guys who were on the staff last year. I mean, it sucks because I think for those guys, they're going to have to answer those questions now. Like, if they have to interview for another job, what do you think the first question is going to be? You mean you didn't have your quarterback learning how to watch film? What was going on there? So that there could be some effect there. I don't think it's going to have an effect on the new staff because Ben Johnson wasn't there for that, obviously. And then the second piece of it, I think it's just kind of where we're at with pro athletes right now. And I think it's notable too, because we talked about this with Marvin Harrison last year, right? Like, and Marvin Harrison handled his pre-draft process so differently than almost any other athlete we've seen in that he very much limited the teams he was going to meet with extensively beyond just the combine. He didn't take a physical at the combine, which was, a little out of whack, right? Like as far as a lot of NFL people saw it, but he's like, if I'm going to be a top five pick, why do I want to give the other 27 teams my medical information? And then, he also like didn't work out for the larger group. So, and he had asked teams like, "Do you need me to work out?" And they said no to him. And really, the overarching thing with Marvin there was he handled the entire thing like a business proposition. Why is that relevant with Marvin and Caleb Williams? Well, because they were the first high school class to enter college in the NIL era. So these guys have legitimately been businessmen since they were 18 years old. It's the first group that came out of high school into the NIL era. I thought that was notable with Marvin, and I think it's notable here with Caleb. Caleb asked these big picture questions that guys 10, 15, 20 years ago may not have asked. And I think it's part of what this generation of athlete is going to be. They're entering the league with money in their pocket. They have some leverage because of it. And they've had, the chance to kind of write their ticket right up until they enter the NFL. And so, I think for Caleb, it was kind of what we've seen about him resisting going to Chicago was part of a bigger picture thing, which is I'm handling I'm handling my business affairs like they're business affairs. Like this is big business, and I'm going to treat it as such. And and even though he didn't go through with it, the fact that he just explored it, I think, is a precursor to more guys handling their pre-draft process this way because they're more prepared to based on what they went through in
Well, how
college.
surprised are you that somebody hasn't pulled in Eli Manning?
I mean, yeah, it's surprising, but like how many guys really have the leverage to do it? You know what I mean? Like how many guys are that level? I mean, Caleb was seen as on the level of Trevor Lawrence and Andrew Luck, and that's probably it, over the last 20 years. So there aren't a ton of guys who have the leverage to pull it off. Um,
What about Arch Manning?
he might, yeah. I mean, like, and we'll see, right? Like, because I don't know if Arch is going to come out like after next year. I think you and I think you'd agree with me in this, right? Like, based on the family history, I think he's probably going to spend at least 2 more years at Texas,
Yeah,
would be my guess.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like, he certainly could do that, like where,
But he's
uh,
going to get an idea where he could go if he is
yeah, and he's got to
legitimate.
play well, obviously. Let's establish
Yeah,
that first, too. But
yes.
yeah, he's got,
But
yeah,
let's say the Saints are right there with the number one pick.
right.
Would
Yeah.
then that you know help him with his decision that maybe there is a best case scenario? I would come out to play for my hometown. If not, then I'm going to stay and play one more year.
I mean, well, that's what Peyton did, right? Because Peyton
Payton was
knew.
going to the Jets.
Jets, yeah, with Parcells there, and he decided not to do it, right? Like, so, like, I think Peyton had, I would argue Peyton had that sort of decision on the table in 1997 when he decided to go back to Tennessee.
Mm.
I mean, that's the ultimate sliding door situation, like scenario, by the way. Like, what would have happened if Peyton Manning went to the Jets? Like, then does Bill Belichick stay in New York? You know what I mean? Like, because he was lined up to be Parcells' successor. Like, how many things are different if Peyton Manning comes out in 97? But yeah, I mean, I think that like he'll certainly I would think based on how everything's been handled over the years with that family that they will weigh everything. Now, I think the interesting part about the decision that Arch would have to make if he plays at that level this year um, would be the history of quarterbacks that only start 1 year is not very good. Only start 1 year as collegians. Some teams look at it as this threshold that you have to get past is 25 starts, right? You want to have 25 starts in college. And the history of guys who have more than 25 starts is much better than guys who don't. Um, you know, Arch isn't going to be there at the end of this year. He'll be short of that at the end of this year. So how beneficial does the situation, how good does the situation that the NFL team's presenting that has the number one pick, if he plays that well, how good does that situation have to be to supersede what might statistically be best for his development? I think those are the sorts of questions you'd be asking. And I think they'd be asking those questions too.
When do you think we'll get clarity on what the Cleveland Browns are doing at quarterback?
um, I have to think it's going to be hard for them to run a 4-man competition in camp. because you have to get the rest of your team ready because of the rules. There's only so many opportunities you get with your first offense out there. You've got to prepare the other 10 guys in the huddle to play football, to play offense in 2025. And so you can't just endlessly have this quarterback derby going on. So I would think my guess would be they have to at least get a read on it over the course of the next 5 weeks, 6 weeks in OTAs and mini camp. And allow that to sort of guide them as far as how good a shot every one of those guys has at winning the job when we get to the summer. Where it's like at least in their heads narrowed down a little bit, where they're giving the best opportunities to the guys who have proven themselves the most. So, it's funny too, like, because I thought about this and like, it's like, well, Joe Flacco could just, because he was there 2 years ago, he could just, give up some of the reps so the other guys could get it. Do you think Joe's going to sign up for that, Dan? Like, I mean, like, he wants to start, so it's like, Tommy Reese is the offensive coordinator. He wasn't there 2 years ago. So if you're Joe, do you want to give Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders all of these reps with the new coordinator that you're not getting that might give them a leg up in the competition, which could end up could like wind up leading to you losing your job. Like I don't see that being I don't see that being the best course of action for Joe Flacco either. So it's definitely complicated in a lot of different ways. And I do think more so than in a normal quarterback competition, because there are four of them, they have to get a read on this and have to have an idea of what the pecking order might be coming out of the spring. And then I would think you probably are on the second or third preseason game, are making a decision on your starter.
One final thought here with the Aaron Rodgers situation. It feels like there's people that are talking around the topic of Aaron playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Your sense is what?
Talking around in what way?
That, hey, they could see him playing. There's no news here that maybe he's got some personal things he needs to take care. I mean, he didn't want to go to camp. He had something else. So
yeah. So let me give you the logic on this. I think I've been able to ascertain based on some stuff I know and then some stuff I'm projecting out a little bit. I think the personal stuff is legitimate. I would say we should all respect that, of course. And I think the second piece of that is if you sign him in April, if you sign him on April 1st and you say, okay, Aaron, you go take care of your personal stuff. Well, then you've basically signed up for the entire spring, both you and Aaron being overcome with when's he showing up, when's he showing up, when's he showing up. Get to the offseason program. Where's Aaron? Where's Aaron? Where's Aaron? Then that starts again when you start OTAs. It starts again when you get to mini camp. And so do you want to sign up for that where it's just hovering over your team? Or do you say, okay, like you go ahead, you take care of your personal stuff, and we'll push the deal over the goal line when you're ready? I think that's sort of the tack that the Steelers have taken. Is there a risk involved? Yeah, he could change his mind. You know what I mean? Or there could be an injury somewhere, or who knows? But I don't think like the contract's going to be an issue. I don't think the relationship. I don't think there's any issue there. Like I think all that stuff's taken care of. And now it's just when Aaron's ready to sign, and I think he'll be a Steeler. We'll see what happens.
Play nice there at the owners' meeting, okay?
I'll try my best. Sometimes I'm not good at that, but I'll try and do it for you, Dan. How about that?
Have you been yelled at by an owner recently?
Recently?
When's the last time?
Normally when an owner's pissed at me, it comes through some sort of conduit. It happened in the fall. Somebody wasn't very happy with. It was actually like a couple people came at me for my portrayal of an owner, but I'll just say it wound up all being true. And what I find in these situations, Dan, is that they get upset at you in the moment and then give it a few months and they'll admit you were right.
So it was the Patriots, huh?
It wasn't the Patriots. You might have the conference right, though. There you go.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Could be the Jets.
Yeah, never know.
Could be the Jets. He's Albert Breer, Monday Morning Quarterback. Thank you, Albert.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
We'll take a break here. We'll get to your phone calls coming up. And top of the hour, somebody is predicting Pacers in 6. He'll join us.